Hey guys, this is Miss Briscoe here. Today in this lesson, you're going to see what it means to read closely to a text and how we can use the RACE strategy to cite evidence. That's something that I've asked you guys to do with all of your reading response questions, and anytime that you have a text to read, I really want you to read it closely. So I'm going to go ahead and model that a little bit for you today so that you guys can have a review of what it means to read closely to a text when you have a purpose for reading, and how to use the RACE strategy to answer questions and cite text. So that's what we're going to be learning about today. So the article that you were given to read was Reasons for the Age of Exploration. So this was an article that I gave you to read to get a little background information about the age of exploration and why it came about. So you were supposed to read this once over to kind of get a brief idea of what this article is about. And as you can see, there's an intro paragraph to this article. Usually the first paragraph of a text is going to give you the main idea of the text. This one says, why did European explorations begin to flourish in the 1400s? Two main reasons stand out. First, Europeans of the time had several motives for exploring the world. Second, advances in knowledge and technology helped make voyages of discovery possible. So this paragraph tells me that we're going to be learning about the reasons or the motives for the exploration and what technology and knowledge helped these explorations and explorers possible. So as you close read, you really want to read the text the first time to get the gist of the text. What is the text really about? The second time, you want to go back in with a purpose. Why am I reading this text? And so if you were to look on the second page here, there's 4 guiding questions. These guiding questions are what I'm going to use as my reason that I'm going to be reading this text. They're my goal. I want to be able to answer those 4 questions after reading this text. So after you read a text the first time to get a brief overview, a general idea of what the text is about, I want to go back and I'm going to read these questions so that I know what am I looking for when I go back and reread this text. So let's start with question number 1. What are some key motives for Europeans during the Age of Exploration? So I need to find out what the key motives for Europeans during the Age of Exploration are. Now, one word in there, motives, stands out to me. What does motive mean? Well, motives is kind of like the reason for doing something. What motivates you to do something? So if I were to replace motives with reason, it would help me to better understand my question. What were some key reasons for Europeans during the Age of Exploration? So what were the reasons that the Europeans started to want to explore, start this Age of Exploration? So that is going to be my first reason for reading this text. So I have a little sticky note here with that question that's going to help me remember why I'm reading this text. So as you can see, our text has 2 main headings. We have motives for exploration and advances in knowledge and technology. Well, I know that I'm looking for motives, so I know that I can go ahead and probably find my answer for this question in this first column because it even has a heading, motives for exploration. So let's go back and find what were some key motives. Now, I remember that when I was reading, there were multiple motives. So I know there's going to be more than one. So when I want to use the RACE strategy, the first thing that I want to do is I want to restate my question. So restating my question means I'm going to turn it into a statement. So based on the text, because I'm going to cite my text, reason for the Age of Exploration some key motives for Europeans during the age of exploration were. So far for my race strategy, I've started off with the R. I've restated my question, and I've also cited my text. If you can see, based on the text, and I wrote the title of my text, and then I restated my question. Okay, so now I need to go back and find out what were the motives. Find my proof. I need to find my answer and my proof. So I know from reading here, I'm going to go back and reread and find out what some motives were. So starting under here, motives for exploration. For early explorers, one of the main motives for exploration was the desire to find new trade routes. Well, there's one of my motives. So let me go ahead and write that down while I have it. And if I had a pencil or a highlighter, I could always come back in and I could highlight my proof or underline my proof. So I can go ahead and highlight that. And I have it highlighted so that I can keep my proof right there. So some of the key motives for Europeans during the age of exploration were that they wanted to find new trade routes. Now I'm putting a comma because I'm going to be listing some of the motives because I remember there were more than one when I read. So let me keep reading to find out what some of my motives were. By the 1400s, merchants and crusaders had brought many goods to Europe from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Demands for these goods increased the desire for trade. Europeans were especially interested in spices from Asia. They had learned to use spices to help preserve food during winter and to cover up the taste of food that was no longer fresh. Trade with the East, however, was expensive and difficult. Muslims and Italians controlled the flow of trade. Muslim traders carried goods to the east coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Italian merchants then brought the goods to Europe. Problems arose when Muslim rulers sometimes closed the trade routes from Asia to Europe. Also, the goods went through many hands and each trading party raised their prices. European monarchs and merchants wanted to break the hold that Muslim and Italians had on trade. One way to do this was to find a sea route to Asia. Portuguese sailors looked for a route that went around Africa. Christopher Columbus tried to reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic. So if I were to summarize this, this gives me the reasons why they wanted a trade route. So I already have that motive that they wanted new trade routes, but that just gave two more paragraphs with more information about why they wanted a new trade route. So it's not really anything that's going to help me to answer my question. What I just did right there is I stopped and summarized what I read. I went back and made sure I really understood what I read. And I understood that it's not anything that's going to help me answer this question, but it is something that I needed to know so that I could move on before I read more. So if I come down here, other motives, so I know I'm going to hear some more motives, so I really want to pay close attention. Other motives also came into play. Many people were excited by the opportunity for new knowledge. Explorers saw the chance to earn fame and glory as well as wealth. Some craved adventure, and as new lands were discovered, nations wanted to claim the land's riches for themselves. So this is another motive. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. So explorers saw the chance to earn fame, glory, and wealth, and some craved adventure. So that is something, if it's going to highlight for me, let me make sure I have my highlighter here. There we go. So there's some more evidence that's going to help prove my answer, support my answer. So after they wanted to find new trade routes, explorers wanted adventure, fame, glory, and wealth. And if you notice, I put that into my own words. I didn't write this exact sentence. If I did, I would have had to put it in quotations, but I kind of summarized this entire paragraph. So let's keep reading to see if we have any other motives before I end my summary. A final motive. Ooh, so there's a final motive. A final motive for exploration was the desire to spread Christianity. Both Protestants and Catholic nations were eager to make new converts. Missionaries followed the path blazed by explorers, sometimes using force to bring native peoples into their faith. So religion was a major motive. And here all I did is I summarized that a motive was to spread Christianity, to spread religion. So I'm going to write and to spread religion. And I can end my answer. I've given my motives. So if I were to think back to my race strategy, I've restated my question, I've answered it, I've cited my evidence because I've written here where my evidence came from, and I've explained it. I proved I have evidence all right here. So what I need to do is I need to go back and read my answer to make sure it makes sense, check it for spelling, and check it for grammar. Based on the text, reason for the age of exploration, and see I see a mistake. I have a capital S in the middle of a sentence. I need to take that out. Some key motives for Europeans during the age of exploration were that they wanted to find new trade routes, explorers wanted adventure, fame, glory, and wealth, and to spread religion. So I think that's a pretty good answer. I've used the race strategy. I've even highlighted proof in my text. I could highlight the exploration was to spread Christianity if I wanted to make sure, I have that evidence highlighted or underlined. So I think I did a really good job with that. So that would be the first question. So I've used some close reading strategies and I've used my race strategy to answer that question. So I'm going to pull this over to the side and I'm going to go back down because we have a second question. Which motive do you think was the strongest for encouraging European explorations and why? So this type of question is an opinion question. There is no wrong answer. You could choose any of the motives that you want. However, you could get this question wrong if you don't provide support for your answer. This why right here is very important. You can't just tell me which motive you think is the strongest. You need to also tell me why. And that's where that support from the text really comes in. So let's bring this sticky note over here. Let's go back up because I'm looking for motives still, so I'm still going to be reading in this section. Let me go back and find what do I think is the strongest and why. Well, I first need to restate my question. I believe that the strongest motive encouraging European explorers, and I'm spelling it wrong, explorations, was finding new trade routes. So I think I've restated my question and I've answered it. I believe that the strongest motive encouraging European explorations was finding new trade routes. I think that is the strongest motive. And I'm going to tell you why. As I was reading through this, I had 3 whole paragraphs of information explaining about the trade routes. Now, I think the trade routes, and I'm thinking aloud here, I think the trade routes are important because they affected so many people. It affected Muslims, it affected Italians, it affected Europeans, it affected merchants, buyers, it affected rulers, so many people. And one of the really important sentences that kind of helped me come up with ideas about this is this sentence right here. European monarchs and merchants wanted to break the hold that Muslims and Italians had on trade. So in this sentence, it shows that European monarchs and merchants, and if the merchants are affected, so are the sellers, or so are the buyers. Merchants are people who sell things. So the monarchs, who would be rulers, are affected. They're very important people. Merchants, who are the ones that sell and buy items, are affected. We all buy items. We all buy things. So that's why I think that's the strongest motivation, because there are so many people who were affected by the trade routes. So I think that that was one of the strongest encouraging factors, as well as the fact that monarchs have a lot of money, and with a lot of money they were able to support a lot of these explorations, because the explorations cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to have a ship back then and go, hundreds of miles and have people who would work on that ship for you. So now what I need to do is take all of those thoughts that I had and put them into a sentence citing my evidence here. So in the text, the author wrote, and I'm going to cite that sentence, European monarchs and merchants wanted to break the hold that Muslims and Italians had on trade. So I've cited my text. Now I need to explain my reasoning. Monarchs and merchants have lots of wealth. So they would be able to fund the exploration and trade plus trade is how people got what they needed back then to survive. Okay, so I've restated, I've answered, I have cited my text, and I have explained it. And if you notice, I put all of this in my own words, and what was not in my own words, I cited in between the quotation marks. Now I need to go back and read it and make sure it makes sense, check for spelling, and check for grammar. I believe that the strongest motive encouraging European explorations was finding new trade routes. In the text, the author wrote, European monarchs and merchants wanted to break the hold that Muslims and Italians had on trade. Monarchs, so I have some spelling issues, a capital, it shouldn't be there. Monarchs and merchants have lots of wealth. So they would be able to fund the exploration. Plus, trade is how people got what, that doesn't make sense, get what they needed back then to survive. So if you notice, I had multiple errors. What I expect for you to do is every time that you write something, even if it's one sentence, reread it out loud, make sure it sounds right, check it for spelling, check it for grammar, conventions, punctuation, all of that kind of stuff. Everything that you turn into me, you should be checking it to make sure it's top-notch work. So now that you can see how we use the race strategy and read closely to find knowledge or to gain knowledge from texts, I would love for you to practice those strategies, answering questions 3 and 4 from this article. And go ahead and talk about that with your learning guide after you do it to see how well you think you did. All right, guys, have a great day.